أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Since I made that last dictations about the books that had an impact on me, on my way of thinking, uh, a lot of I received a lot of comments, and a lot of people also messaged me saying if it's possible for me to share some of these stories from that book called Jurayee Az Darya, a drop from the ocean or drop from the sea. And I thought maybe it may be possible for me to maybe share one or two stories, in a video, and then if I get an opportunity and the time to record more videos, inshallah, it may be possible for me to just select some of the stories. Obviously, the book is 4 volumes, and there are tons and tons of stories where some stories get very technical as well, with a lot of different names and dates, which may not be so important for for everybody. So what I decided to do is maybe select certain stories of certain ulama and share them with everyone so that they can get an exposure into, or an insight into this book, Jurayee Az Darya. This is the book that I'm referring to, which I shared also in my dictations. Now, that dictations on Jurayee Az Darya was available for everybody. However, after that, I did make another video which was just for the members only, and that was the second book that I spoke about that had an impact on the way on the way of my thinking, and things that shaped my perception of Islamic intellectual history, about Islamic discussions, and all of that. And inshallah, I have a few more episodes for a couple other books that also shaped the way I think, that are going to be released, but those ones are going to be just for members only. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out the members only section, where there's a lot of interesting content over there. So what I decided to do is I started to, so there was a couple of ways that I could have done this, because in multiple volumes the same scholars might appear. So for example, if he is talking about Sayyid Sadr, well, Sayyid Sadr's entry, it comes in volume 1, and then it might come in volume 2 and 3 and 4 as well. So I thought maybe what I'll do is I'll just find the scholars' names, and then I'll just go through the different volumes and tell you what the stories are. But that was going to take too much time. Then I thought maybe I should go in chronological order based on the different books. But all of that was getting too complicated. So I said, you know what, let me just stick with volume 1. Let's start with volume 1, and let's just go in the order that they are in this book. Because in this book, the first story is of Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli died in 1693. The year 1693. So it's 17th century. It's a very late scholar. But in other volumes, he'll start with scholars from the 3rd century Hijri and 4th century, like Shaykh Saduq and all of these other scholars. So we won't go that way. We'll just stick with the volume 1, and then let's see how far we can even get through with this. Now, one thing I do want to mention is the way I want to do this is, I'll quote the stories, but I will also give some of my, sort of additional points and comments as well. And maybe I will, not maybe, I will demonstrate also how certain things that you read, especially if you're a Hausa student or in that field of Islamic studies, how these things can actually become like launching pads, and like a jumping pad for you to do further research. And this is something that we used to do in the Hausa very much. A lot of people asked, Sayyid Ali, how did you do so much research? How do you do so much research? How do you find things, and how do you find these, these little tidbit information and whatnot? Well, this is going to be a good example of how that can happen, right? Nobody just, everything, all research is based off of, your efforts is obviously one thing. You have to put time and effort, but you got to be on the lookout for things, right? So one of the ways that you can be on the lookout for things is, well, when you have a stories being narrated by Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani, and he will mention, certain points within these stories that you need to kind of latch on to, and then further do your further research on those things. So in fact, today I will actually show you an example of literally what I did in real life when I read some of these stories. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the first entry, and that is of Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. Okay, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. Now, I'm not gonna read the story line by line and translate it. I'm gonna try and give a khulasa of it. Okay, I'm gonna try and give a khulasa of it. Look, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli, everybody knows, or I guess most people should know, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is from Jabal Amel. Okay, Jabal Amel is a region in Lebanon, and this scholar, he had moved to Iran during the Safavid era, and he was contemporary to Allama Majlisi as well. And Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is buried in the shrine of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Okay, so you can actually go and visit his grave. It's in one of the sort of basement floors. When you go down the stairs on one of the sahans that is there, you can actually go visit his grave. So he's a very well-known scholar, and he has written many books, like Wasail al-Shia is his book, and he as well as many other books. Now, he has a book called Ithbatul Huda or Ithbatul Hudat. Okay, and Ithbatul Hudat is a book of it's published in 5 volumes nowadays, and it is a book which records all the different proofs and evidence that he can find for the establishing the imamat of the 12 imams. Okay, so all the different narrations and all of that. In the last section or the last volume, he gets to the 12th imam. And for Imam Mahdi, once again, he brings all the evidence and proofs and the hadith and all of that. It's compiled in these 4 or 5 volumes. But one of the last sections of the book, he starts talking, when he's talking about Imam Mahdi especially, he starts talking about things which are not, direct evidence, but they are basically to corroborate the evidence that is already established. So what do I mean by that? For example, dreams and these karamat that might happen, or things that people may have experienced and seen. So look, just on their own, they wouldn't really prove the existence or the imamat of Imam Mahdi. Like, you're not going to go prove the imamat through a dream. But once you have established these things, that okay, there is a 12th imam, there's, he exists, he was born, all of that stuff is proven, then these further sources and evidence, like dreams, for example, or karamat, can be used to further strengthen your point. So that's what he does in this book. So when he gets to the end of this book, he starts quoting some certain miracles and certain dreams. So Shaykh Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani quotes this story about Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. Okay, he quotes not about Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli, but from this section of Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. Okay, and what does he say? He says that we were sitting in a village. Okay, we were in this village called it's called Mashghara. Okay, Mashghara. Now, it's a small town. It's a small town in the Bika Valley of Lebanon. Okay, Mashghara. So he says we were sitting there on the day of Eid when a small group of students and pious individuals, they came. And I said to them, I wish I knew whether I will be amongst those who are alive or dead in the upcoming Eid. A man whose name was Sheikh Muhammad, a classmate of ours, said to me, he said, I know I will be alive the next Eid, and the Eid following it, and the Eid following it until for another 26 years. And he appeared to be very certain about it. And he wasn't joking. So meaning Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli says, I said to him, do you have ilm al-ghayb? Like, only Allah knows when you will die. Nobody knows the time of their death. And he says, no, I don't have ilm al-ghayb. But I saw Imam Mahdi alayhi salam in my dream one day when I was very, very ill. And I said to him, I am ill and I fear that I will die while I do not have any righteous deeds that I can present in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then in this dream, Imam Mahdi said to me, do not fear, for Allah will cure you of this illness and you will not die from it. Rather, you will die and you will live for another 26 years. Then he gave me a cup which was in his hand, and I drank from this cup, and my illness disappeared and I was cured. As I sat up, I knew that this was not from Shaitan. This was not a dream from Shaitan. Okay. Now, he goes on. So Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli actually goes on. He says, when I heard the words of this man, I wrote down the year. So Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is saying when this man first told us the story, I think 26 years before he died, I wrote down the date and it was 1049. Okay, 1049 Hijri. A lot of time had passed since then, and I had moved to the city of Mashhad. Right, as I said, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli passed away in Mashhad. So he says, since then I moved to Mashhad. So he's not even in Lebanon anymore. The story happened in Lebanon. He had moved to Mashhad, and in the year 1072, I had moved to Mashhad. When it was the supposed last year of that person, it came to my heart that this time period has lapsed. Okay, I referred back to the date and the year and saw that 26 years had passed. I said, the man must have passed away. A month or two had not passed, and I received a letter from my brother from our country, from Lebanon, informing me that the aforementioned man had passed away. So this Sheikh Muhammad guy, he had passed away. Okay. So this is what Shaykh Hurr so this is what Ayatullah Zanjani quotes from one of the stories that happened in Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli's lifetime. Okay. So when I actually read this story, it is in fact through this story that I learned about the book Isbatul Hudad, okay, which I have over here. Okay, so I have the physical copy. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. For me, it would be like, okay, so Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is trying to prove the Imam. Why is he quoting dreams? So when you go purchase the book and then you start reading through the book, you realize, oh, wait, he's not using the dream as the proof for his existence, but the dreams are just coming at the end, almost like an appendix, okay, for further sort of, to corroborate the evidence that is already there. Now, when you go through this book, volume 5, there are in fact a lot of other dreams that he quotes, and some of them are actually very interesting. And lo and behold, I actually translated some of them a while back, about 3-4 years ago, well, almost pretty much 4 years ago now. It's 2024, so January 2020. Okay, now look, as I said, I was able to discover this book or learn about this book early on because I read this story, and so basically pay attention to the footnotes. The book is full of footnotes. Footnotes are very key in some of these books. You want to make sure where are the references coming from, what books are they referring to, where is he quoting from, and then make some time to go and further research these books. So when you further research these books, you go and you figure out, all these things. Now, so here's the book, and here's the section on where Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli quotes it. But, there's a lot of other interesting stories that came up when I read this. So just one story from Shaykh Sayyid Shubayri took me to a whole chapter where there's a lot of other interesting dreams, which I found even more interesting. So I translated them. So let me show you one of them. He says, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli says that, قَدْ رَأَيْتُ مِنَ الْمَهْدِ مُعْجِزَاتٍ فِي النَّوْمِ مَرَارًا. He says, I have seen dreams, I have seen miracles, and from the Imam Mahdi in my dreams several times. He says one of them is this: when I was very young, around 10 years old, I was afflicted with a severe illness. My family and close relatives had all gathered around me as they wept and mourned, certain that I would die that night. It was then that I saw the Prophet and the 12 Imams while I was in the state of sleep and consciousness. So he was like basically coming in and out of his, consciousness. I offered my greetings to them, shook their hands one by one, and a conversation took place between me and As-Sadiq alayhi salam, which I do not recall. So I don't remember what the conversation was about, except that he made dua for me. When I offered my greetings to the Imam of the time, meaning Imam Mahdi, I shook his hands and I cried and I said, "O Master, I fear that I will die in this state of illness and would not have spent time in gaining knowledge and acting on it." Okay, so remember, this is Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is 10 years old. He's only 10. And he's worried about gaining knowledge and spending, acting on it. He replied, "Do not fear, for you will not die because of this illness. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cure you and you will live a long life." Then he gave me a cup which was in his hand, and I drank from it. I recovered from that state, and my illness had completely disappeared. I then sat up and my family was shocked, but I did not tell them what I saw until a few days later. Okay, so that was very interesting. Okay. Anyways, I will put this link in the description. You can read some of the other stories. This one is really interesting, right? Number 167. He says, I saw him one time. I saw him in my dream. So this is number 167. Okay. I saw him in my sleep while he was sitting in the lesson in which I would sit in the holy shrine under the large noble dome. So basically, where I would give my classes and I would listen to the lessons, he was sitting there. Imam Mehdi was sitting there. I came towards him, offered him my greetings, kissed his hands, and said, "O my master, I have questions. Am I allowed to ask you about them?" He said, "Write them so that I can write the response for them for you, as that is further away from forgetfulness." Basically, write down the things so that people don't forget. He then gave me ink and paper, and I wrote 4 questions for him. I left some empty space for the response. He began writing with his hand, and I got closer to him so that I could see his handwriting. Okay, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli saying, I wanted to see how the Imam writes. I saw that his handwriting was mediocre. Okay, it wasn't that nice, like it was just fine. It was just okay. Mediocre. And it came to my mind that I used to think that the handwriting of my master would be better than this. Okay, so in his dream, he's saying, why is the Imam's handwriting not that nice? I thought it would be better than this. So when this thought came to my mind, the Imam turned towards me, and before I could say anything, he said to me, "It is not from the conditions of the Imam that his handwriting has to be really good." And then I said to him, "You have spoken the truth, my master. May I be sacrificed upon you." So, as I said, these are all dreams, right? Other scholars can come and kind of question the validity of these dreams and what do they really even mean? What can you derive from them? All of that discussion is on the side, right? This episode is not about going into those discussions, but it does give you something to think about, because now you know that Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli used to think that Imam Mehdi must have like the best handwriting in the world. And then in his dream, he sees that, hey, it's not that nice. The handwriting's not even all that, pretty mediocre. And then the Imam tells him that, why are you assuming that the Imam must have like really, really good handwriting? Why are you assuming that? It's not from the conditions of Imamat, right? Conditions of Imamat are isma and, those type of qualities. Where did like good handwriting come from? So and this is something that we do all the time, right? So for me, it would be like, oh yeah, you know what? Sometimes we superimpose things onto the Imams or to the Masumin in general. We superimpose qualities that we feel people should have, and then we superimpose it on them and we say, they must have this quality because they're Imams, they're perfect, they're Insan Kamil, we say all these terms, and then over here, Imam Mahdi is saying, wait, why are you assuming I have good handwriting? Don't just make up criteria and then superimpose it on us. So, look, just a simple dream, but as I said, I wouldn't necessarily look at this as some sort of evidence. It's not. And Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli, in all honesty, he's not bringing it as, the main proof for the existence of Imam Mahdi. He's not doing that. He's bringing it right at the end of his 5-volume work. Right at the end, he has these stories and stuff. But even within these stories, there's things to kind of pay attention to and kind of, think about a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. So, Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli is writing this, so clearly he, his doubt or his misperception that he had was clarified. Okay, so that is the first entry number 1 from Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani about Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. So let's go to the second entry. Now this one is very long. It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7 pages. So I will just try and summarize once again, what is going on. This section is about Sayyid Sadruddin Ameli. Sayyid Sadruddin ibn Salih, ibn Salih, who is the great grandfather of Imam Musa Sadr. Great grandfather of Imam Musa Sadr. And inshallah, I will show you. So once I read this entry, I don't know, 2014 or it was 2013. Once I read this, then you start looking into it further. You start looking into the family tree of these scholars and who are they, because Sayyid Sadruddin Ameli is going to be connected to so many different ulama. He's going to be connected to Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli from his daughter's side. He's the grandson from his daughter's side. He's connected to, I don't know, Shaheed Thani, and he's connected to many different ulama in the past. But let's look at something about him, right? So as I said, I will try to summarize it. He says, so now Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani is saying that, look, I have heard that Sayyid Sadruddin did not have marji'iyya amma. He was not a marja for the general community and the masses. Okay, he never got that. And he says, so Sayyid Zanjani says, this is because he didn't want it. Right? He says either he didn't want it or maybe there was some other reason. Okay? But he says all of the other maraji showed an intense amount of humility in front of him. They showed an intense khudu' ajibi, strange type of humility in front of Sayyid Sadruddin. Then the rest of the section he starts quoting from Hasan Sadr. Hasan Sadr is also from one of the grandsons of from the Sadr family, from the brother's side, and so on. So he's from the family, and he has written some other books called Ta'sis al-Shia. He's written a book called Takmilatu al-Ameli. He's written some of these books, and in one of these books, in his book called Takmila, he has written this description about his, his Sayyid Sadruddin. Sayyid Sadruddin passed away in 1848. Okay, so he's born in the late 18th century and died in the middle of the 19th century. Okay, so he's an old scholar. There's no pictures or anything of him. So now Hasan Sadr is describing his family patriarch basically. He says at age 7 he wrote a commentary on a book called Qatrun Nida. Qatrun Nida is a book on Arabic grammar basically. It's a book on Arabic grammar, on syntax. It's a book that you study in the seminary. At the age of 7, Sayyid Sadruddin wrote a commentary on this, like a oral commentary, or let's say marginal notes, hashia. At the age of 12, he attended the lessons of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum. Okay, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, one of these scholars of his era. And then Sayyid Sadruddin himself says that in the year 1205 Hijri, when I was 12 years old, I went to Karbala. I visited Karbala, and at that time, Shaykh Wahid Bahbahani, who is the founder founder basically of the modern day Usuli school of thought. He says when I was only 12, Wahid Bahbahani was there in Karbala, and he was adamant on his view on what he calls insidad. Okay, insidad is this technical view that exists amongst it existed amongst some of the Usuliyun of the past, like Wahid Bahbahani, Mirza Qumi, and today also Ayatullah Shubayri Zanjani also believes in this, with obviously some differences and technical differences that exist. Anyways, that's not so relevant right now, but it was a view that's not really held by a majority of the Shia scholars. So he says at that time Wahid Bahbahani was very firmly upon this view. Maybe later on Wahid Bahbahani changed it or not, but at that time he says he was musir, he was adamant that this is the right view. And then he says, in that same year, I went to the classes of Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, and he was writing his book, one of his books, and he gave that book that he was writing to me at the age of 12 so that I could edit it for grammatical issues and mistakes, that I could edit his book. In the year 1210, when I was 17 years old, I got an ijaza. Okay, I got an ijaza of basically either ijaza of ijtihad from Sahib al-Riyad. Sahib al-Riyad is also one of these senior scholars and from the students of from the first generation of Usuli scholars essentially. Okay, I got an ijaza from Sahib al-Riyad, and in that ijaza, Sahib al-Riyad has written that this Sayyid Sadruddin has been a mujtahid since 4 years ago when he was 13 years old. And just like Allama Hilli and Fadil Hindi is also one of our scholars, Sayyid Sadruddin attained ijtihad before he reached the age of bulugh. Okay, so this child, Sayyid Sadruddin, was a genius. However, more than his ijtihad, he was known for his grasp on Arabic grammar and poetry. And Sheikh Jabir Qazmi, who died in 1313 Hijri, who was one of the most famous poets of his time, and he's known for this very famous qasida called Kazim-e-Uzri. It must be a qasida, I haven't looked into this. And he said, the Sheikh Jabir Qazmi said, that Sayyid Sadruddin is stronger in poetry than Sharif Radi. Sharif Radi, the author of Nahjul Balagha. Everybody knows Sharif Radi, Sayyid Radi is one of the top poets in the Shi'i tradition. So Sheikh Jabir is saying, who's a poet, well-known poet of his era, says that Sayyid Sadruddin is stronger in poetry than Sharif Radi, and this is while everybody knows that Sharif Radi is the most poetic in the tribe of Quraysh. In the tribe of Quraysh, Sharif Radi is the top poet of that tribe, and he says this Sayyid Sadruddin is even stronger than him. Now Sayyid Sadruddin says that when I was in Baghdad, I was around 23 years old and my dad passed away. But at that time in Baghdad, I started to attend the lessons of Sayyid Sibghatullah. Sayyid Sibghatullah was one of the imams of the Ahlul Sunnah. And he says that I would debate him in different topics, including I debated him on the topic of imamat, and then I was able to, basically defeat him in this debate. And this is the reason why Sayyid Sibghatullah actually left Baghdad and he migrated to Iran, because the pressure and the sort of humiliation, I guess, that he basically faced over there, he was forced to kind of leave that city. Okay, his scholarship was probably brought into question. Now, there's a person by the name of Sheikh Sadr bin Muhsin A'sam al-Najafi, okay, who died in 1307 Hijri. Okay, he's a contemporary of Sayyid Sadruddin and some other scholars. So now look, Sayyid Shubayri is quoting from these people. Okay, not directly, but through, let's say, the books of Takmila or other works. He says, so this Sheikh Sadr, who's alive at that time of Sayyid Sadruddin, he says, when Sayyid Sadruddin moved to Najaf, he stayed in the house of Sahib al-Jawahir. Sahib al-Jawahir is also a scholar who is one of the, he's written one of the largest books of fiqh in Shi'i tradition. It's a very extensive book of deductive jurisprudence, essentially. Anyways, he's written this book, and he says that he stayed in the house of Sahib al-Jawahir. And when Sayyid Sadruddin entered his house, Sahib al-Jawahir quickly got up and held him by the arm and made him sit in his place, and Sahib Jawahir sat in front of him out of respect. Sahib al-Jawahir and Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita were the top-notch scholars of their era. Okay, people, we know this. But they would sit in front of him as if Sayyid Sadruddin is their teacher, even though they were around the same age. Ayatullah Shubayri says that it is possible that they may have studied something with him. Okay? And they were around the same age, so it's possible they may have studied or learned something from him. But regardless, they would treat him as if he is their teacher, and they would sit in front of him as if they're just nobodies. So now this Sheikh Sadiq himself is saying, he says, I once saw them in the haram of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and all three of them are walking. So Sayyid Sadruddin is walking, Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita and Sahib al-Jawahir is walking. But he says that Sayyid Sadruddin had an issue with one of his feet. Okay, either it was, I don't know, paralyzed, or it was injured or something like that. It had some issue. So he was being carried on one side by Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita and on the other side by Sahib al-Jawahir. So both of them were holding Sayyid Sadruddin, on both sides, and they were helping him walk in the haram of Imam Ali alayhi salam, because he could not stand up or walk without any support. And then he says, this Sheikh Sadiq, who's this person who is amongst them, like maybe a student of theirs or whatever. He says, once I witnessed a discussion between him and Sahib al-Jawahir on the eras of fiqh. Eras of fiqh is actually a class that I am just almost ready to record. It will be just for members only, but it will be, all the different eras our fiqh went through. Anyways, that's, inshallah, I will release the first explanation video of it on the dictations, and the rest of it will be for members. But this person saw Sahib al-Jawahir and Sayyid Sadruddin discussing this topic of eras of fiqh. And he was able to explain all the different eras from the time of, Sheikh Saduq and Mufid and Sheikh Tusi all the way till their time, and discuss all the different methodologies and different approaches of these different ulama, who had their own schools of thought within the ijtihad, right? And then he says that when Sayyid Sadruddin left that gathering, it was just us and Sahib al-Jawahir was sitting. So Sahib al-Jawahir said, why do you need us when you have someone like Sayyid Sadruddin with his level of grasp on these topics? You don't even need us. So then he quotes the story of how Sayyid Sadruddin passed away. He says that he was in Isfahan at that time in 1262 Hijri, which is around 1847. And in Isfahan, he sees a dream, right? And in that dream, Imam Ali comes to him and he says that you will be a guest, you will be our guest. So Sayyid Sadruddin took the message that, I will probably pass away soon. So he left Isfahan and he traveled to Najaf alone. Over there, he stayed in the house of one of his cousins by the name of Sayyid Muhammad Ali bin Sayyid Abul Hassan. He stayed in his house, it was one of his cousins, and he stayed with him. And so now Sayyid Ali, the Sayyid Muhammad Ali, is narrating this story. He's saying, he stayed with us and for about, just about a year. And one night, we were just talking, and he said, go away, like let's go away, give me some space, right? And he said to him, Sayyid Sadruddin asked him, what are you studying? So this Sayyid Muhammad is around 20 years old at that time. So he says, what are you studying? He says, I'm studying the Sharh of Ibn Nazim on Alfiya of Ibn Malik. So Alfiya of Ibn Malik is this 1,000-line poetry on Arabic grammar written by a scholar named Ibn Malik, and then different scholars wrote their commentaries on it. Like Suyuti wrote a commentary, Ibn Aqil wrote a commentary, Ibn Nazim wrote a commentary, different people wrote commentaries. For example, we studied a little bit of Suyuti, we studied a little bit of not a little bit, quite a bit of Ibn Aqil. So we studied this commentary on the Alfiya of Ibn Malik. So this person was studying a third scholar's commentary in the Hawza on the Alfiya of Ibn Malik. So Sayyid Sadruddin says that, look, Ibn Malik says this line of poetry, I'm going to recite it in a different way, and you go and tell me what is the difference between his line of poetry and my line of poetry on that same topic. So Sayyid Muhammad, this cousin of his, says that I started to tell him the difference, but then Sayyid Sadruddin said, listen, go away, write down the answer, and then bring it to me. So he says, I kind of figured out that, Sayyid Sadruddin doesn't want me right now. He wants me to kind of step away. So I stepped away. I started writing things down. And then he says that when I was busy writing, when I started to hear the sound from his bedroom, Allah, Allah, la ilaha illallah, I started to hear this. And I quickly ran to my father. And he was in the hal of ihtidar. Ihtidar means in the state of, passing away. And it seemed like he wanted to say something, but he wasn't able to, say anything. And then basically he passed away. It was the last part of the night. And then after he passed away, someone came to our door and knocked on our door and asked us, has Sayyid Sadruddin passed away? And we said, yes, he just passed away. And this person said, yes, please come. His grave is already ready in the sahan of the haram. And we were confused and shocked that how did this person figure out Sayyid Sadruddin has passed away and the grave is already ready for him. So this is a story that he quotes. And now he quotes the source of this story as well, Takmilatu al-Ameli, Sayyid Hassan Sadr, page 235. Okay, and you can, Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani says that there are many other similar stories that are there in this book as well that you can go read. Now, he also talks about his akhlaq. Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani says that, look, Sayyid Sadruddin was very well known for his akhlaq, and he says he was also known for his weeping and crying and tears. He had a soft spot when it came to his relationship with God. He says that one time he was in the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, and he would do his ziyarah and so on. And then one time he started the dua of Abu Hamza Thumali, and he started to read the line, Ilahi la tu'addibni bi'uqubatik. He read this line and he started to repeat it. Okay? Ilahi la tu'addibni bi'uqubatik, meaning, oh Allah, do not discipline me with your punishments. And he would just read and read and read. He would just repeat this line until he fainted. He became unconscious. And he was not even able to recite the rest of the dua. And they literally carried him out of the haram while he was unconscious. And he says, Sayyid Shubayri says that Sayyid Zohde khayli fawq al-adi dashte wa khayli bi dunya bi i'tina bude. He had a lot of zuhud, very ascetic, and he had no interest in the dunyawi affairs. Right? So this is another story that he quotes. And then he quotes another interesting story that he says that in 1782, when Sayyid Sadruddin was still in Lebanon, the governor, his name was Ahmed Jazar. Okay, Ahmed Jazar, he was an Ottoman governor, and his name is also Jazar Pasha, as his title, basically that. And he says he was the governor of Jabal Amil. Okay, and he was Ahlul Sunnah, but he was very anti-Shia, and he had killed many Shias, and this is why they would call him Jazar. Jazar means butcher, so they gave him the title. And Ayatullah Shubayri says that he was just like the Saddam Hussein of our era, just like that. So Sayyid Sadruddin had been put in the prison of this Ahmed Jazar, and it was a solitary confinement. You could not tell if it's day or night or whatever. So what he did, he started to recite Dua Ta'ir Rumi. Okay, I'm not too familiar with this dua, but basically Ayatollah Shubayri says that this dua is in the Muhajjad Da'awat of, I believe, Sayyid ibn Ta'us. Okay, it's in that book. And he says he started to read this, and what ends up happening is that the prison cracks open, the walls crack open, and then he's able to escape from the prison, and that's how he came to Najaf. He escaped to Najaf. Okay, and he explains how. Yeah, so after that he just says the same, because remember, these stories are said at different times, so maybe sometimes he repeats certain things. So over here he's repeating the same point, that he passed away in Najaf and this year and so on. So that's not so important. Now the rest of the stories are more about his family line and family tree. There's so many names. It's gonna get confusing if I just say them orally. I might as well show you certain things. So this is Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli. You already seen this. Now this is that Jazar Pasha. So look, I wouldn't have known who on earth is this Ahmed Jazar. So I would go out of my way to go and find him up. Okay, and you don't have to do some next level, academic research. You just want to know who these people were. So look, Jazar Pasha has an entire page on, basically on on Wikipedia. So look, it actually says he defeated the Shia Muslim, his ally Nasif al-Nasr, consolidating his control over Jabal Amil. Okay, and then so on and so forth. So if you want to read about him, what was he all about, what did he do, destruction of Shia autonomy. So look, there's a whole section on just his sort of crimes and his oppression against the Shia. Like, he must have been known for this. So you can read up on this. Okay, now when it comes to Sayyid Sadruddin, you can also do further research, especially if you know Farsi. So look, you can always go on, let's say Wiki Shia or other places where there's reliable and well researched content, right? You can you can learn about his his books, his works, what did he write. Look over, they have a whole section about his akhlaq here as well. Anyways, there are a couple of family trees as well for his for his family. So this one is on the Farsi Wikipedia. We're talking about here. So this is the Sadruddin we're talking about. Sadruddin, the son of Sayyid Salih. So you come down, and then he has all these sons. One of the sons is Ismail Sadr, and then Ismail Sadr, he has a son named Muhammad Jawad Sadr, Sadruddin Sadr, Haider Sadr, Muhammad Mahdi Sadr. So look, Haider Sadr's kids were Shahid Baqir al-Sadr, Amna bint al-Huda, and then Muhammad Jawad Sadr's were, Sadruddin Sadr's kids were all of these, including Musa Sadr, Imam Musa Sadr, right? So this is how the whole family tree is. But this family tree, even though it's a little bit blurry here, it kind of shows you the upper lineage. So that one was more about, Sayyid Sadruddin and his kids. This is more about his ancestors. So there's a lot of details over here. So this is Sayyid Salih. So this is Sayyid Sadruddin, the one we talked about right now. His father Salih. His father was Muhammad, the son-in-law of Muhammad bin Hassan Hurr al-Ameli. So the son-in-law of Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli's son. Okay, so the son-in-law of Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli's son. Then he's also linked with Sahib Madarik. He's linked to Shahid Thani, and basically Nuzhatul Jalis. he's also linked to some other ulama over here. So that is the story of Sayyid Sadruddin that Shaykh Sayyid Shubayri Zanjani mentions in this book. So anyways, that's all we're gonna cover. Just two quick short stories. I hope they were interesting and they kind of gave you a glimpse into Shaykh Hurr al-Ameli and this book of his, and some of the stories that he mentioned, some of the dreams. I will link the Iqra article online as well. And then the second scholar is Sayyid Sadruddin from the 19th century and some of his stories and who he was all about. So inshallah, I hope you enjoyed this one, this small, shorter episode. And I'll see you all in a future episode, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.